How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiegue, live today on Friday, April 26th. And what a day we had yesterday. The first round of the NFL Draft concluded last night. I'm going to get into it talking about everything that happened in that first round as the first segment. All the picks and my reactions to it will be coming in just a few seconds. And then later on in the show, I'll get into more of an in-depth look at two of the biggest surprises, my biggest surprises in the draft, and what went into it, some quotes from why these transactions happened. That is coming up later in the show. And then for the first time that I'm doing it on this live show, we're going to have a live reaction to the second round of the NFL Draft starting in about half an hour from now. That'll be the last two segments on today's show. My live reaction, pick by pick, as to what is currently going on in the second round of the NFL Draft. So stick around to that. You're not going to want to miss it and my analysis on that. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And before I get into breaking down the first round, I would like to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments you want to make during the show, to use the tip and donations link you see on your screen, gsmcpodcast.net. Using that link, I'm able to see your question or comment. I can read it out on air during the show, and we can carry the conversation on that way. It's interactive, it's more engaging, and it's a massive help for this show as well as all the other shows across the network. So again, if you would, use that tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. We would greatly appreciate it if you're able to use that with any question or comment. But like I mentioned, jumping now into recapping the first round, a lot happened. A lot was expected. Looking back to my mock draft and how I had it, I had a few more trades going on in the first round, at least in the earlier part of the first round. And of course, it all ended up turning out like it usually does in the manner that is the simplest form. There wasn't a trade up until pick 10, and then everything else just went accordingly as it was planned. So going through it right off the bat, Caleb Williams went number 1. That was expected. No real surprises there. Then the Commanders was the real big question mark to start off the NFL Draft. Looking at it, there were some trade talks. Reports came out after that. There were interest there, but Jaden Daniels always seemed to be their guy, so he went second overall. No real big monumental changes there. Then at number 3, again, if you look at Drake May getting selected to the Patriots, afterwards there were reports from Albert Breer and a bunch of other sources that the Giants reached out with a couple first-round picks to move up in that. I'm sure other teams reached out as well. And I'm sure it was very intriguing at some point whether or not to trade the pick or select Drake May. Evidently, it all ended up turning out for their best interest. They get their quarterback of the future. And in the mock draft that I had Drake May going here, and I just thought it was the best situation because of Jacoby Brissett being there. You don't have to start Drake May right away. You can have that bridge year,
SWB
really
audio
develop
capture,
him, and then
not registered.
transition into him starting the following year and build around him even more. So I like that pick. Nothing really to comment other than that. Then at number 4, probably the most obvious pick other than Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to the Cardinals. Probably the most talented and best player in this draft. You can argue Brock Bowers or Malik Neighbors, but really from the beginning of time, it seemed like Marvin Harrison, he was just NFL ready, pro ready. I mentioned it yesterday while I was watching the draft that, he could play in about a week or two. You could give him the playbook, you could give him everything for the Cardinals, and he could be ready to play in a week or two. He's the most NFL ready player overall that I saw in this year's draft. The Cardinals get a stud at that position, and it evidently just ends up helping Kyler Murray to really play off and really validate that contract that they gave him. If you give him that amount of contract to Kyler Murray, you want to get him all the best possible options to succeed in his time there. Marvin Harrison is a great first step to do that, and he was the pick at number 4. Then at number 5, Joe Alt goes to the Chargers. Kind of a surprise because people think the Chargers need wide receivers, or they do need wide receivers, but the way the Chargers have been talking about the offensive line and building that up, this shouldn't be a surprise. Joe Alt was the best offensive lineman in the draft, and he goes number 5 to the Chargers. Then at number 6 again, the Giants select Malik Nabers. There was all that quarterback talk. Maybe Michael Penix sneaks in there. He didn't go that early, but the Giants select Malik Nabers. I was harping for this pick to end up being the actual pick by the Giants. They get somebody to help Daniel Jones because they're not really able to move on from him now because of that salary cap hit. Get a wide receiver that not only helps Daniel Jones, and if it doesn't work out, Malik Nabers will still only get better with maybe another quarterback that you draft or trade for or do whatever in the near future. And then at number 7, the Titans were sort of rumored to move out of this pick if Rome Odunze was still there. Joe Alt was mocked to go to them in a ton of mock drafts leading up to the NFL draft, but Joe Alt was already taken, so you're thinking maybe a playmaker, Rome Odunze. I thought that was going to end up being the pick, but they decided to address offensive line, protect Will Levis because they already have playmakers on the outside in DeAndre Hopkins and signing Calvin Ridley. It makes sense to address the offensive line and really nail that down first, and then maybe you could address someone still in the second round because there's a ton of talent out there, or in free agency as well through veteran receivers. J.C. Latham, great pick, good fit there in Tennessee for the sort of offense they want to build. Then the biggest surprise, I won't go too far into it right now. That'll be for the next segment. But Michael Penix goes to the Atlanta Falcons. Everybody had to pick up their jaw from the ground after seeing that pick being announced by Roger Goodell. After signing Kirk Cousins and everything like that, to bring in another quarterback definitely had some people scratching their heads. But, Raheem Morris seemed to be a big fan of him, their general manager as well. There is questions about the injury history and his age already. When will he start? But regardless of that, he's the pick. You can't do anything about it now. We're just going to have to see how it all pans out with that dynamic with Kirk Cousins in there as well. But moving on forward with the next pick, the Bears selected Rome Odunze. Really close to making the Bears my big winners from this draft overall because I love Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams being brought in to add to that offense, which almost seems as complete as it has ever been, at least in my time really following the NFL. I can't remember another time when the Bears had this much talent on offense, young talent as well. Registered. Maybe not Keenan Allen young, but he's still one of the best receivers in the league. DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift, Caleb and Rome Odunze come in there as well. Now it's exciting. It'll bring more people in. They have plans to build a new stadium. You want to fill it up, and this is the right way to do it. I love this pick, and I love what the Bears did in the first round. Then J.J. McCarthy goes 10 to the Vikings. I had that right in my mock draft, but I thought they'd have to be trading up to number 5 with the Chargers to get J.J. It didn't turn out that way. It turned out better for them to only trade up with the New York Jets to stop waiting around and make sure they get their guy. And the biggest thing for me was the way that JJ talked about Kevin O'Connell specifically in an interview leading up to the first round, how much praise he really had for Kevin O'Connell, and Kevin O'Connell likewise having a lot of praise, not specifically for JJ, but for their next quarterback that they drafted. You never really hear Kevin O'Connell talking that highly before about their next quarterback and planning for the future. Now he decides to start talking about it and how this next guy is going to be the guy for them going forward for the next few years. It all just lined up too coincidentally for it to just be exactly that, a coincidence. I thought they were a match made in heaven. I said the Vikings were the best landing spot for any of these quarterbacks. JJ now transitions from a very talented Michigan team, Michigan offense, to an equally as talented Minnesota offense as well. I'm expecting great things, and he is definitely in contention to start for them from day one. Then just to round out these last few picks, the Jets went with Olu Fashanu. They decided to protect Aaron Rodgers and really project towards the future. Tyron Smith hasn't been the most durable, so they go offensive line. Then the Broncos as well surprised me by going Bo Nix. I'll get more into that in the next segment, but they decide to get their quarterback and move on with that. Then at number 13, the Raiders don't get their quarterback, but they draft one of the most talented players in the entire draft in Brock Bowers. It'll be interesting to see how they play off of him and Michael Mayer, who they drafted recently, but he was too talented to pass up, in my opinion, so I like that pick as well. Then the Saints go Taliese Fuaga, the offensive tackle from Oregon State. The Ryan Ramczyk situation, Trevor Penning not working out. This was the most logical pick for them to solidify that offensive line. It might not be exciting, but it was a big need for them at that value to have him still sitting there. I think that was a great pick for them as well. Then the first defensive player selected in the entire draft, Laiatu Latu, goes to the Indianapolis Colts. There were talks around secondary, maybe Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers goes 2 picks before them. Could they have traded there? That ultimately wasn't the case. They go defense and add to a young defense already, bringing in more talent. They have some pieces on offense already. This was a way to round out everything that they had there already. And in Seattle, they go with Byron Murphy, number 16th in the draft. Back-to-back defensive players taken. It makes sense for Seattle to add to that defensive line. It certainly needs more help bringing pressure to opposing quarterbacks and offenses just in general as well. I like the pick. I thought Byron Murphy would have still stuck around there. I thought the Seahawks might go offensive line, but they felt defense was a bigger need, and they went on with that. Then, just to move it down here just a little bit, in the second part of the first round, technically, at 17, the Vikings again trade up to get Dallas Turner. In contention with the Bears, the Vikings just had a great draft. They were able to still stick around in the first round. They trade up to get Dallas Turner. At that value, I had him going at number 8. To have him going 9 picks later is outstanding by the Vikings. They get their future quarterback and their future edge rusher. And it kind of reminds me of the Houston Texans when they drafted CJ and Will Anderson in the same draft. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to have the same level of success, but it is very similar to that. It could pan out similar to it. They have evidently all the pieces on offense, and on defense they've added some great additions as well. The Vikings and the Bears probably hit the nail on the head in the first round, doubling up on their picks and getting huge positions of need. Then the Bengals go Amarius Mims, not projected really to start right away because of the lack of experience, and the Bengals already addressing offensive tackle in free agency with Trent Brown most recently, but it is good for him to learn under all these veterans, get better, gain that additional experience. And there were some injury concerns, so that could all work itself out in the first year. If he does get hurt doing something, he isn't of need right now. They have the pieces there for him to work out and work through that first year, any struggles he may have. Then at 19, the Rams, the first pick they've had in the first round since 2016, they go Jared Verse, edge rusher out of Florida State. A solid pick for them. Not a lot of people will talk about it, but I think it's a good addition. Because of the loss of Aaron Donald, the sudden retirement, you bring him in, not at the same position, but just adding to that defensive line. They found a few gems last year in the draft. This adds to that young defensive line that they have. It'll certainly be a big help for them going forward. Then the Steelers get a massive value pick here. Troy Fautanu, the offensive tackle from Washington. Nobody expected him to be there. I certainly didn't expect him to be there. The Steelers said they had him high on their draft board. He goes to them at 20, and it addresses a big need. Now, we're just going to have to see how they add on to it because other people thought they'd go receiver, cornerback, center. They choose to go tackle. Certainly a position of need, but look to them maybe in the second round coming up here sooner for them to make a move here. Then the rest of these picks, pretty self-explanatory, not too much to go into on all of them. Just the biggest one that I wanted to mention before I close out this first segment is the Kansas City Chiefs. It was written in the stars, I had to say it, with them getting Xavier Worthy because of the comparisons you see with Tyreek Hill. As soon as he ran that 40, as soon as he ran that 40 in Indianapolis, my thought went exactly to him being drafted by the Chiefs. I had him going earlier to the Colts just because of recent reports that came out with them liking him. But really, in all honesty, it was always going to be the Chiefs. They trade up a few spots to get him. They get their short of replacement in Tyreek Hill, and now that offense is looking very scary and very fast, in all honesty, to work itself in to 2024 and the rest of the regular season. That one was the biggest shocker. Not really, but just the one that caught my eye the most because it was always going to be that way that they ended up. And the rest of the first round ended mostly how some people would have expected. Not too many big surprises there, other than the Eagles as well. I have to mention them. Getting Quinyon Mitchell at 22 could be looked at as one of the biggest steals. If it all works out like he is projected, to get him at 22 when he was mocked to be from anywhere from 12 to 17 and not getting past that, it's great business, great job sticking to your pick and trusting that he'd be there. They get a young cornerback to probably play right away for them. I love that pick. Great value there for the Eagles to steal one there in the first round. But that'll do it for my reactions to the first down, breaking it down, kind of going over them in a little bit of detail for each pick. We're going to go to a quick break right now, and then on the other side, I'm going to go more into those surprises that happened in the first round around Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Why? I have more questions than answers right now, and I'll let you guys know what those are. So stick around and find out on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here on the show to jump right away into the second segment. The Falcons and the Denver Broncos, mostly the Falcons, shocking everyone with their pick of Michael Penix, bringing in another quarterback after they signed Kirk Cousins to that massive 4-year, $180 million deal. $100 million guaranteed already to Kirk Cousins. People just asking why would this be a selection that the Falcons would make? Well, in all honesty, it just seemed like Raheem Morris really was fond of Michael Penix. Same with their general manager, Terry Fontenot. Bringing in Michael Penix, they had a lot of scouting there at his pro days and had a lot of extensive meetings with him. They explained a little bit into why they decided to go into this pick. More so Raheem Morris saying, these guys go off the board pretty quickly, and we thought it would be important for us to address our future quarterback right now while we're picking this early. We don't want to be back in this position again. Then general manager Terry Fontenot added that they won't be in this position, very adamant and confident that they're not trying to be back in this position. He thinks they won't be back in this position, drafting early for a quarterback to lead them, lead their offense and lead their organization. From that point, it makes sense. But then you get into the problems, the friction that you might encounter with Kirk Cousins and his agent. His agent, Mike McCartney, gave an official statement to NFL media afterwards in which he said, yes, it was a big surprise. We had no idea this was coming. The truth is the whole league had no idea this was coming. We got no heads up. Kirk got a call from the Falcons when they were on the clock. That was the first we heard. It never came up in any conversation. And that just seems to be the root, the mainstay of all this, of all these issues that could come with Michael Penix being selected. My issues, confusion around this whole scenario of the draft and really having a good draft, having a good pick, really to me boils down to you have a lot of questions going into the draft, maybe a lot of positions you have to address. And for me, a good pick is, or a good draft overall would be addressing a lot of these positions and then leaving the NFL draft with more answers and more of a positive feeling than questions. This pick by the Falcons really doesn't give any answers to any of the main problems that they have and really left more people with a lot more questions after they selected Michael Penix than answers and clarity of what this Falcons team could be going forward. And that's really the main issue I have. Just a lot more questions coming towards the Falcons, towards Michael Penix. And then I want to state that Michael Penix is a great player. I think he's a great player. He had a great season at Washington. I watched a lot of their games. But with this, with the media attention that you've garnered with this whole situation, it all starts with Michael Penix. Personally, I feel a little upset that he doesn't really get a chance to jump in right away to make his team or the team that selected him his own. Right away, it looks like he's going to be the backup, and with Kirk Cousins being there at least for 2 to 3 years, are you willing to wait that long to start Michael Penix? He is 24 years old already, and say it's only 2 years, 26 years old without not really getting any real first-team reps. If Kirk Cousins plays good, why else would you pay him that much money if you don't think he's going to be a great quarterback? Coming off of an Achilles injury is one thing. Understandable. With Kirk, you don't really know how that's going to work. But addressing that with a quarterback that has been the most injured out of all the other quarterbacks doesn't really make too much sense to me there. And with Michael Penix taking over or being drafted to the Falcons as well, you're just going to get all the extra stuff from the media, probably constantly asking these two, asking Kirk Cousins, just bringing up any chance that they get, how their relationship is going, how they're probably going to ask Kirk Cousins if he feels entitled to train or mentor Michael Penix to some extent. And whatever response he gets is going to create headlines. If he gives a wrong response, it's going to create more awkward tension there when I don't think it was absolutely necessary to bring in Michael Penix in there. And I know Raheem Morris, I read the quote that said that they don't want to be back in this position drafting a quarterback this high. The quarterback is of obvious importance to any team. Regardless of who they have in there, the quarterback is the most important position. But saying that you don't want to be back there picking that early for a quarterback, you don't know when you're going to get the opportunity to do that again, so let's go take one right now. You could argue, or I would argue, that defense is, especially edge rusher, with having a prominent, very reliable edge rusher, a top-tier quarterback hunter, I would argue it's just as important to have one of those. Definitely a little bit less than a quarterback, but it's probably 2 or 3 on the hierarchy positioning of vital players that you have to have. And if you feel like you don't want to be back here picking a top 10 talent at quarterback, why wouldn't you want to not be in this position again to draft a top edge rusher, top talent edge rusher for your defense? You know, when are you going to get another chance realistically, if you want to be so good, to have a chance to draft a top 10 edge rusher like Dallas Turner or anybody that you had as your best defensive player? When are you going to ever get another chance to be drafting in the top 10, top 8, if you want to be as great as you want to be? That, again, wasn't really cleared up to me with Michael Penix and how that would all work out. And overall, I have more questions. I'm sure I'm going to have more questions going forward, but this could all work out great, or not great, but good in some ways for the Falcons, because with Kirk Cousins, if it doesn't work out great, say he's really bad, he's not the same with the Achilles injury, you have a good replacement to bring in, and then instead of Kirk Cousins being not as good and you not having any other options to fall on because you traded away Desmond Ridder. Now you have a good backup to come in, and if he balls out, he wins the job, that's great, and you're just going to have to swallow paying Kirk Cousins all that money, but in the end, winning games and having the best quarterback out there is what matters. So that's really the overall positive thing. I don't want to paint this out to be a negative thing because Michael Penix is a great talent. I'm a big fan of him. It's just confusing because some people will just say he fell to the wrong team. And just going on the rest of the offseason and into the season, we're going to see how it all pans out, if there's any tension or friction there. But for right now, I'm sure people will give it a lot of bad reviews. I'm trying to look on the positive side of this, but certainly I as well have questions around this move for the Falcons. And then moving on to the Broncos real quick here. Bo Nix at number 12. It seemed inevitable that the Broncos were going to end up drafting Bo Nix. They seem to be the most in contact, the most fond of each other with the Broncos and Bo Nix, especially where they were picking. Nobody thought realistically the Broncos would trade up that high. But at 12, even though it all pointed to that direction, I just thought 12 was too early for a team that I thought needed a lot more help elsewhere. And to get Bo Nix, the instant thought I had was exactly that. You could get him later potentially, maybe later in the first round if you didn't want to take your chances the rest of the first round and wait until the second round to get him. That's understandable. 12 just seemed too early for me. And Sean Payton, over and over, the Broncos afterwards have said that, Bo Nix was their guy. It was evident from the start. And specifically, Sean Payton said on this whole process of selecting Bo Nix, he said, "We considered moving back, but once Penix went, it got a little stressful there at the end. We just didn't want to overthink this. This is our guy. We were going to take our guy. We would have been sick if we lost him for a couple of fifth-round picks." It's funny that he says that because, he's been there. He's been in that situation where they wait. He thinks he could get him in a few picks. We're just going to sit and not do anything crazy here, trade up or over reach here and take him too early. He's been on the opposite end of that spectrum because if you think back to 2017 when Sean Payton was with the New Orleans Saints, needing a quarterback back in 2017, they had the 11th overall pick. And to give more context, in 2017, if some of you don't remember, up until pick number 9, or through pick number 9, Mitchell Trubisky was the only quarterback taken at number 2. And then you still had Patrick Mahomes in there as well as other options. It was widely rumored and reported that Sean Payton was a big fan of Patrick Mahomes. Now, years later, I'm sure everyone will say that he was certainly going to draft him because, he saw him being this great quarterback. I don't really buy that, but regardless, he was a big fan of Patrick Mahomes for whatever reason at that moment. And Mitchell Trubisky was the only quarterback taken up to that point. Then it came to pick number 10 for the Buffalo Bills. Not likely to draft a quarterback back then. It was the last pick right before Sean Payton wouldn't have had to do anything to draft Patrick Mahomes. He could have taken him, and he really, really liked him. But then the Chiefs shock everyone and move up to the 10th overall pick and trade 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick to move and swap picks with the Buffalo Bills all the way from pick 27 to number 10 to jump in front of Sean Payton and take his guy. Patrick Mahomes goes on to be arguably the best quarterback already of all time, definitely in that conversation. And to make matters worse, playing in the same division as Sean Payton, just reminding him over and over again of what could happen if you don't overreach potentially or get the guy that you really want at your pick, regardless if it's too early, too late, or perfect in some people's minds. Saying that, it all kind of explains why his reasoning was there to draft Bo Nix at number 12. But at the same time, I just have to ask myself, when the Chiefs were selecting Patrick Mahomes, and you go back and tune in and everything, you don't want to mess up that opportunity. Of course, it could have worked out differently with Patrick. You always think back, what could have been, what could have been, what could have been. But I just think it's very different in these two situations, and I'll wrap up this segment with this. Mahomes walked into, thankfully for him and his career, I'm sure, walked into a great situation with Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, learning under Alex Smith already, a very seasoned, very successful veteran. To walk into that situation, that played almost as much as his own talent and his trajectory did in being the kind of quarterback that he is now, walking into a fantastic situation there in Kansas City. To compare it now to Bo Nix and try to use that same logic there of trying to not miss out on your top guy, Bo Nix might start right away for the Denver Broncos. He doesn't have that veteran there to kind of learn off of. The weapons around him aren't great compared to what the Chiefs had as well. And he's already 24 years old. There could be a ceiling there on how much better he can be compared to what you saw at Oregon and at the college level. So there are questions there. And you already have 3 other quarterbacks on your roster to compete for this job, to try and get you in the best situation that you can with your organization. There are some subtle differences there. I don't think Sean Payton referencing back to that time there to the Chiefs and missing out on Patrick Mahomes really fits too much here, but he has that feeling. Of course, you're going to be reminded of it every day when you're playing Patrick Mahomes and stuff like that. I just think it is hard to ignore it and move past it, but in this situation, I don't think it lines up too much, and I'm definitely asking more questions, like the Falcons, from me about this pick. When are you going to address the other positions that you need? You don't have too many picks left in the draft overall, so they've decided to go with this. A quarterback is important, of course, the most important position, but still, I am left with a bit more puzzled view on this than I would be satisfied if they traded back and still had the opportunity to get Bo Nix. But regardless of that, that's in the past now. The start of the second round is currently underway now, so stick around till the time after this break. I'm going to come back and have live reactions to the second round of the NFL draft for the rest of this show. So don't go anywhere. A lot more content and a lot more surprises, hopefully, in this second round right after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back here to the show. The second round of the NFL draft is currently starting. Of course, for copyright reasons, I can't show it on here, but I do have it up on my phone. No sound, of course, either, to live react to some of these picks in the second round. And just to add on, before the picks are officially made official and they are decided on, recapping some of the second round and what to look forward to before these picks are made. To end that first round, you saw the Carolina Panthers trade one spot up and sort of just change picks there with the Buffalo Bills and bring in Xavier Legette from South Carolina, the wide receiver. I mentioned it on a YouTube short leading up to the first round that Xavier Legette mentioned in an interview that the Panthers always had conversations with him, had multiple interactions with him, and said that if he is there in the second round, he would be the selection by them. And really, it just seemed like the Panthers couldn't wait. Of course, the Bills needed a wide receiver. They were picking ahead of them. The Chiefs needed a wide receiver, but they went with Xavier Worthy. I'm sure the Panthers got a little bit stressed out when the 49ers picked Ricky Pearsall from Florida. So, in that how it all broke down. And in that event, they decided to move up one spot and made sure they get the guy that they needed and the guy that they really valued as their best pick. And they traded up, and now, with that being said, they got Xavier Legette. But people looked at the Buffalo Bills on the other end of this trade, looking at them in the other end of that trade and seeing what they would do now, because they're not really in a position with their wide receiver room to feel content about it, to feel like they don't need a receiver. Of course, they only moved it back one spot, but regardless of that, of what they do, people are still going to ask the question, and more so with the idea of them trading their original spot in the draft to the Kansas City Chiefs because of, their constant rivalry in the playoffs and how their results have not really panned out with them in the playoffs. They just lost to them at home, and it was just always a meme. They're always poking fun of them from this perspective of, the Bills are always in the best spot of trying to make their competition around them better. They won't fail at making all the teams around them better while making them worse at the same time. You saw them trade Stephon Diggs to the Texans, and in that, it was reported that they wouldn't trade Stephon Diggs to the Kansas City Chiefs of all teams. A little pettiness there, a bit of bitterness as well. They weren't fond of the idea, obviously, of Stephon Diggs being traded there. Even if he wanted to, they weren't going to allow it. But in the same breath, just a few weeks later, they trade away their pick for the pick that the Kansas City Chiefs had and help them get on wide receiver for them in the end that will end up benefiting them, similarly to Stephon Diggs, but with a rookie this time in Xavier Worthy. So a bit confusing there why they made that trade, but regardless of that, it happened, and now the Bills really kick off this second round with trying to find a receiver. I expect them to trade one or select one here to start the second round. And who they pick, they have a lot of options there to choose from. A.D. Mitchell is still there. They have a bunch. Robin Wilson has been rumored around teams and being a very underrated receiver there that could help out right away. You have Ladd McConkey from Georgia as well. It really just comes down to the fit that the Buffalo Bills are looking for here in this draft and trying to figure out what works best for them. I've mentioned before that they're in a situation, I believe now, that they are in a spot where it doesn't have to be all Josh Allen. I think it works, ironically, better for them that they try to run the ball, try to play through their running game, their tight ends, and just using Josh Allen, ironically, less than they have been, could work out better for them, and that could shape the idea that they have trying to figure out who to draft here in the second round. So regardless of that, that's something to watch out for. Cooper DeJean is another one who a lot of people had going in the first round, but he fell out of the first round and is still sitting there in the start of the second round now underway. They have some ceremonial actions going on here to start the draft. No pick has officially been made yet. They're bringing on a few players there, I'm assuming, to announce the pick here in just a few minutes. But regardless of that, Cooper DeJean is somebody else to watch out for. There were some talks around centers. Graham Barton was selected to the Buccaneers at 26th overall. But you had other ones like Jackson Powers Johnson was a good one. West Virginia center Zach Frazier was another one to have the talent to be picked earlier on, but they also fell out of that first round. So those are two picks, two positions to look out for as well, heading into the start of this second round. Not officially underway yet, but we can still talk about the second round and what to expect. They have the Michigan team on there now, with the college national championship trophy on there, celebrating it. The draft is in Detroit, kicking off this second round with a lot of ceremonies and a lot there to talk about. There's a ton of people there still for the start of this second round. Nothing really has been announced yet, no trades or anything. To remind you of the order of the start of the second round, you have the Buffalo Bills there from the trade for that wide receiver Xavier Legette to start the second round. The New England Patriots follow them, then it's the Cardinals, then the Commanders, and the Chargers as the first 5 picks in the second round to start off. Thankfully, I think I could speak for everybody that 10 minutes is way too long for teams to make selections in the first round. Thankfully now, the second round and even into the third round, it's a lot less time to pick from. The Buffalo Bills are officially on the clock now. 6 minutes to go before they make a pick. People also I saw reporting on the Buffalo Bills and on just what their plans are in this second day of the draft, that they could trade down again and accumulate more picks. That isn't too far out of the realm of possibility for the Bills at this point. And to say that and go away from what the narrative is of trying to find some weapons for Josh Allen, they're going to have to do that at some point. To have the first pick in the second round, you have great value that you can find there. As an example, just last year, the Steelers being the first pick in the second round, drafting Joey Porter Jr., now probably their best starting corner on their team. And the way it all panned out, it worked out great for them. There is a ton of value still left there. And to follow the trend in the first round, a lot of offensive players went in the first round. I think it was 14 consecutive and 23 overall players on the offensive side of the ball were drafted in that first round. So I would expect and I would predict that to start the second round, there is going to be some offensive players sprinkled in there, but nobody touched on the linebackers really. Nobody took a look at the secondary players, corners, like I mentioned, linebackers. Defensive line is still a position of need. Defensive tackles, there's a lot of good ones left there, a lot of options to choose from there as well. So look for in this second round to start, maybe have more of a defensive taste to it. You have teams like the Chargers who could use more on defense. You know, the Washington Commanders are another team that could add more to their defensive side of the ball. There are some teams in the second round now that I'm remembering that have a few picks, multiple picks in this second round. The Commanders have a few. I know the Eagles have 2 in this second round, and their biggest narrative, their biggest need was on the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion. They added Quinyon Mitchell, and I was a bit surprised that they didn't actually trade up like Howie Roseman tends to do at some point in the first round, more often than not. But he didn't end up doing that, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see them package those two. If they see a player that they really like start to fall a little bit, if they could package those 2 second round picks to move up a few spots or a good amount of spots up, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think Howie Roseman could sit still, in all honesty. So that's something else to look out for in this second round. A lot of defensive players projected to go. The Buffalo Bills, I talked a good bit about them. Looking at another team that could be affected a little bit here in this first round. Similarly to the Bills, and oddly enough that it is the New England Patriots, they also too need a wide receiver. They got their quarterback in Drake May yesterday. I'm sure they're going to look at some more playmakers, maybe on the offensive side of the ball as well, meaning on the offensive line, that they could look to try and make a selection there. So that's something else to look forward to. The Cardinals, another team that really needs a lot of help in a lot of positions. So looking at them, they added a pass rusher. They added Marvin Harrison. They definitely could use more playmakers. So you're looking at the top 3 teams, the Bills, the Patriots, and Cardinals, who could all really go wide receiver. And how does that affect the rest of the second round? It all plays into each other and plays off of each other. So we're going to see how it all pans out. The pick is officially in by the Buffalo Bills. They haven't traded back. They haven't moved or anything. I'm sure they've had calls, but the pick is officially in. So before I announce it on here and react to it on here, I'm going to send it to a quick break. And on the other side, I'm sure the pick will be in and I'll announce it and react to it on this show. So stick around and find out who that pick is after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here on the show to start the fourth segment technically, but to continue on with the live reaction to the picks as they're coming in this second round. The Buffalo Bills are on the clock and the pick is officially in. We're just waiting now for the commissioner to come on and announce the pick. But again, the Buffalo Bills need a wide receiver, need someone to add to Josh Allen because you have this generational type of talent with Josh Allen. You have to do something to add on to it. Yeah, you could change the style, but that doesn't take away from the fact overall that you need to bring in someone to help him out here. Someone is coming up to the podium to announce the pick for the Buffalo Bills. It actually isn't the commissioner this time. I do like how they bring other people on here to announce it. So we will wait here a few seconds, but someone is up on the podium going to announce this pick for the Bills. And, looking at this coverage now, just off topic here for a second, there is a lot of good people that are just announcing the pick. A lot of good coverage out there from ESPN. You have the Pat McAfee show. You have the ABC crew. A lot of good crews out there to analyze. You get different perspectives from a lot of them on whichever one you want to tune into. So I just wanted to throw out an appreciation there because they're all great and they're all really give good insight on the picks and everything like that. But regardless of that, the pick is officially in and the Buffalo Bills have selected Keon Coleman, the wide receiver out of Florida State, as the 33rd overall pick in this draft. They end up going wide receiver. They select Keon Coleman, who is a great talent, one of the many talented wide receiver prospects in this draft. He now goes to Buffalo to play with Josh Allen and potentially be the number one option. He has great size. He is a great talent overall there, coming from Florida State, playing with Jordan Travis, and the kind of season that they had. Very successful there. He played a big role in that. He comes from success. He knows what it takes to win a lot, so I'm sure he'll add tremendously to the Buffalo Bills. The size that he is as well, a more big-bodied receiver, similar more to a Gabe Davis in Keon Coleman if I were to compare him to somebody right away. It's not something that is out of the realm for the Bills to get accustomed to, especially Josh Allen. So they draft Keon Coleman there out of Florida State. The Patriots now were on the clock, but a trade was just announced that they have traded back with the Los Angeles Chargers, and now the Chargers going from the 5th pick in the second round, moving up to the 2nd pick in the second round via a trade with the New England Patriots. So right away, you're seeing how one wide receiver taken as the first pick in the second round right away changes the perspective of everything. I mentioned the Patriots needed a wide receiver. The Cardinals could have certainly needed a wide receiver to come in and help Kyler Murray on top of Marvin Harrison. The Chargers definitely need one after trading away Keenan Allen, getting rid of Austin Eckler. You have Quentin Johnson there, but he didn't have the best of success in his first year, dropped a lot of passes, and it was just a down year overall for the Chargers on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't get too much from Austin Eckler as well. So I expect this pick now, which is officially in by the Los Angeles Chargers. The pick is in. I expect it to be a wide receiver now. Who that could be? It could be Lad McConkey out of Georgia. A.D. Mitchell is still there, a more big-bodied receiver like Quentin Johnson, like Keenan Allen, who they have. Of course, they're different because the route running isn't there. The same sort of style isn't there that Justin Herbert's accustomed to. But oftentimes, these big-bodied wide receivers are more willing to block. It is something that the Chargers have harped on and have wanted to really embrace more of being a physical team, run-heavy team, offensive line based. So that could be something that could be in play here. We'll see how it all pans out. They are showing multiple prospects up on the board, And it is always odd to see another thing that I wanted to bring up here when the draft coverage is on and you see the potential picks of who it could be. A lot of people think that it is live, and you think that it is in the moment that, they're sitting there, they might have a bad look on their face or they might seem excited. A lot of times that comes from earlier on, and they're just showing it as it could be live. Not to take away from a lot of ESPN and trying to take away from the image that they want to put out there, but seeing the reactions of some of these players, and they might be upset or they might be happy for some reason. It could just have to do with nothing related to the selection that is being made. But, regardless of that, that's something I wanted to point out just looking at it here on the coverage. And the Chargers have the official pick in now. They have someone walking up to the podium representing them to make this selection. The 34th overall pick in the NFL draft in this second round to the Los Angeles Chargers ends up being wide receiver Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. I mentioned him as a possible option. The Chargers now take him here. Could have been a little bit earlier than a few people expect out of Georgia. Not the biggest of guys physically as an imposing wide receiver, jump ball wide receiver, but his biggest attribute and his biggest, attraction to the Los Angeles Chargers and what Jim Harbaugh would have liked there at 5'11" out of Georgia is really his route running, his ability to get open, the separation you get there from him. Similar in a way. I know they look different and almost play a little bit differently, but he just reminds me of Roman Wilson and the kind of role that he had with that Michigan team with Jim Harbaugh there in last season when they had a great year. He almost does the same thing, not really addressed with doing too much route running, getting open, getting 10 receptions per game, but he is a reliable option for the quarterback, for Justin Herbert to be in this season, to run intermediate routes, short routes, just get open in one-on-one coverage. They want to play against the heavy base with heavy sets in there to run the ball more efficiently, and having a guy like Ladd McConkey out there on the outside, hopefully for them in one-on-one coverage and more favorable coverage for Ladd McConkey. One-on-one, he's extremely difficult to match up with. If they get that look, he'll certainly get open, similar to Roman Wilson and what he did in Michigan. I like that similarity there, and I really like the fit for the Chargers. I think overall, Ladd McConkey just seems like the type of player that is willing to do anything for them to win. A real team-spirited guy, really heavily based on trying to do whatever the coach asks of him to win. And now he'll go to Los Angeles with the Chargers to play under Jim Harbaugh and be the second wide receiver taken consecutively to start the second round. Now the Chargers have selected the wide receiver that a lot of people thought they needed. They definitely needed, actually, I should say. And they got the best offensive lineman, in my opinion, in the draft at number 5 in Joe Alt. So now that leaves the Arizona Cardinals on the board with their pick. But another trade has just been announced. The Arizona Cardinals were on the clock there, but now they would trade their pick, third overall in the second round, to the Atlanta Falcons. So the Falcons move up a few spots here to the 35th overall selection in the draft, or actually I should say, 35th overall selection in the second round. Now, you look at the Falcons, defense has to be the pick here, I would assume, right? After getting the quarterback, surprising everybody. I just finished talking about it. They have now moved up a few spots here with the Cardinals to select. I have to be right in thinking it's a defensive player. Officially, the Cardinals trade the 35th overall pick and the 186th overall pick to the Falcons, who gave up their 43 overall pick and the 79th overall pick, going to the Arizona Cardinals from the Atlanta Falcons. So they really only move up 8 spots there. The pick is officially in, so we will see who they have in mind. Jer'Zhan Newton is being shown right now on the coverage of it. He could be an intriguing prospect for them. really just defensively is all I'm looking for, in all honesty, for the Falcons. They need more edge rushers, more defensive line, more linebacker presence in there for their defense. Raheem Morris is a defensive guy. He's coming from being the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. So I think this is an obvious pick for them to make here. They traded up. They certainly have somebody in mind if they traded up a few spots to get him. So there is a bit of worry there that they wouldn't get him. So I'm sure they are very fond of this player, whoever it ends up being, that they're going to draft here in just a few seconds. I mentioned before the Falcons bringing in a quarterback. Yeah, it looks crazy right at the moment. It shocked everybody, but there is insurance there with Michael Penix. I won't get too much into it as well. But defensively, this is where they're really going to improve their team on that side of the ball. You have a guy like Jesse Bates there anchoring the secondary. You need a bit of corner help there just outside of their number one corner. I'm forgetting his name now, of course. It's leaving my head. I can't remember it for the life of me. But they have a solid piece in secondary with that corner and Jesse Bates there, who had an outstanding season. Defensively, again, you have a guy like Grady Jarrett, but you definitely need more in that division where you have Alvin Kamara. White from the Buccaneers also kind of had a breakout season last year. You have those two guys. Yeah, the Panthers might not be the most threatening of teams, but they've brought in some guys. They could be a little bit threatening. They were in close games last year with the Falcons, or at least one of them. So there is something there to address on that side of the ball. I assume it's going to be defense here. Someone is up at the podium now, ready to announce the pick for the Atlanta Falcons. And looking at the time now and where this pick is at, this might be the last pick that I announce on here live on this last segment. It probably will be the last pick. So the Atlanta Falcons up on the board right now. The pick is in. They have selected Rook or Horhoro, the defensive tackle from Clemson. That took a lot of effort to say that. Rook Horhoro, there we go. Rook Horhoro out of Clemson, defensive tackle, 6'4", 294 pounds. They address defense, definitely on the defensive side of the ball. They could line him up now with Grady Jarrett and have that presence there with him at Clemson. 5 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss, and 2 passes batted down last season for the Tigers. 30 career starts in 53 games played. So a good bit of there is coming from the Falcons, and trying to sort that out with them and that defensive side of the ball. Looking at the highlights right now, he looks pretty agile and pretty different from what Grady Jarrett can bring them. Now that adds on to Michael Penix and what they've brought on with him. So overall, really they've addressed 2 positions that I wouldn't say of need other than defensive line and that pressure element. But with Michael Penix, there always is some precedent there that it could be positive in the end. So the Falcons address both sides of the ball. We're just going to have to see how it all pans out for them in the end. But they do address defense. I'm happy with that and announcing that pick. And in saying that, that will conclude today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. And please, if you would, like, follow, and subscribe to today's show. If you would also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok for more of the network's content as well. Outside of sports, too, there is a lot of content out there from both networks. And if you want to see more of me and this show, please check out the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube, where YouTube Shorts are posted on other topics roaming around the NFL. Full live shows are all on there as well. If you want to go back and watch a full live show, you're able to do that, as well as individual segment videos if you don't want to watch a full show, or if you missed a certain segment and want to rewatch that, all of that is available on both channels. And as a reminder, tune in every weekday as well at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL conversations and football discussions. More on that around the NFL draft is coming next week, so stick around for that. I want to thank you guys again for tuning in with me, Manny Maradiegue, as your host to today's episode. I wish you guys a great weekend coming up, and I hope to see you guys all back here again on Monday to continue talking about the NFL draft. Thank you guys, and have a great weekend.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.